It is a special time of year in the college hockey world. The Beanpot is underway on Monday, February 4th. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Puck University. I'm Chris Lynch. I'm going to be taking you through the teams, the potential games, the matchups for one of college hockey's great traditions, and I'm not doing it by myself. I've got a friend of mine who is a fellow New England hockey writer, writing for the New England Hockey Journal, also does a bunch of other cool stuff, but for purposes of relevance, he's only with the New England Hockey Journal, even though I know that you do a bunch of other things. Josh Kummins. So Josh, thanks for coming on for your first appearance on this fun little show we have going here.
Thanks, Chris, for having me. Excited to talk about the Beanpot. Just a few more days, obviously, and it should be fun at the Garden.
I agree. It's always one of the better experiences of the season because for us, it's really close by, and we like going into the TD Garden. In part, the renovations around the building really have made that building a lot more accessible and a lot better. There's an actual entrance area, which allows us media folks to kind of quietly, easily go in through the side door. Meanwhile, everyone else can go through an actual entrance, and no one is cramming up North Station under there.
Yeah, I know. It's been really cool to watch the kind of the transformation around there, and I get to go in maybe a little more often than you do, as I'm doing cover some of the Bruins games for us as well, talking to some of the local guys, and really just every week it seemed like something new was there, and it'll be kind of on full display for the Beanpot especially, and now going forward as kind of things get underway. And I know next year it might even look even different inside too. I know they're kind of preparing some of the some of the suites are going to change and things like that. So it'll be looks different outside. It's going to look different inside, I believe, next year.
I don't know if I mentioned this to you before, but my dad actually had. We're talking about the TD Garden because it's the home of the Beanpot. This will be the 67th edition of the Beanpot, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, 67th edition.
67.
And almost all of them have been held in either the old Boston Garden or the new TD Garden, which I interchangeably refer to as the Boston Garden. A fun little fact about it, my dad actually had a part in when he was working as an attorney in Boston. This was in the early and mid 90s before we moved down to Connecticut. He actually worked on some of the negotiating for some of the contracts to build TD Garden. Specifically, he actually helped to put together some of the locker room considerations for the teams, namely the Celtics. So I just always like to mention that I like that building because I know that my dad helped to build it. So that's just kind of cool. Okay, so that's the building itself. It's just nice to know that they're renovating it and making it look nicer. As for the games to be played, I don't know what to expect. I think this is the most wide open the tournament has been since I've been paying attention to it in any serious way, which admittedly is not the longest of times. I think I only started really enjoying college hockey around 2011, 2010, that window. But I only started intensely following it around 2013 and 14 and loving it in 15. So this is still the most wide open that I've ever seen this tournament.
No, I agree. It's definitely, it seems like it has been, and I think we say it every year, a line pretty similar to that, but it definitely feels like that this year because of the way the seasons have gone for all of the teams. I guess Northeastern, you would say, has been the most consistent, but other than them, there's really no team that hasn't had ups and downs through the season. And I guess I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit more as we go on, but BU and Harvard are playing some of their best hockey of the entire season at this point, where, like I said, Northeastern's been pretty consistent, and BC has been a lot of up and down, especially when it comes to non-conference play. And I guess that's what the Beanpot is, and especially for them is they'll be playing Harvard, so they'll be bringing their kind of crazy non-conference losing streak into the Beanpot as well, and hoping to not only end that, but definitely the Beanpot is definitely up for grabs this year. And even though they've had a little bit of struggle, it's the Beanpot, and Jerry York always gets them ready for what he likes to call the beginning of trophy season. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, and it should be anyone's tournament. Obviously, four great goaltenders as well, which always helps in this. And I'm sure we'll get into kind of each team as we go on, but definitely a wide open tournament and should be fun to watch.
Yeah, let's start with that Boston College team, which let me make where, if you've listened to this for any bit of time, where my undergraduate degree is from, and where my natural rival is. And I still have to make this note of, I have never seen BC been this weak entering the Beanpot tournament. 8-12-3 is their overall record. All 8 of their wins come in Hockey East. And there are some truly terrible non-conference losses on here. They got into a shootout with Wisconsin and lost 7-5 early on, got slaughtered 7-0 by St. Cloud, lost at home to Bentley in November, got swept by Arizona State, and even some of their recent performances in Hockey East have been questionable, by which I mean not very good, including a 4-6 loss, is 6-4 loss rather at New Hampshire, and a 7-2 home loss on January the 16th against Maine. That's not good, man. I look at this BC team and their seeming inability to score goals, and I think, are we looking at potentially a third consecutive year finishing in 4th place in the Beanpot? Because A, it's got to be some kind of record for them for the most times they finish down there, and B, that means they haven't won a Beanpot game since the 2016 Beanpot final, when they won 1-0 over BU and Sean McGuire was the best player on the ice, but couldn't keep up everything on his own forever, and they won it pretty early on in overtime. But this is the weakest I've ever seen BC, and I don't think it's that close, at least in my estimation.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's been, like I said at the beginning and like we're talking about, it's been an up and down year. It's crazy you think of some of those losses, but even recently, their 2 kind of Hockey East wins, in actually their only 2 Hockey East wins in January were against Providence. So it's really been an up and down kind of start for them. And I guess you have to say with BC that they have Joe Wall in net, so they're never going to be out of any game. And although I don't think he's been at the best that we've known him for sure this year, he's definitely someone who's capable of stealing a game in 2 games, and that's really all you need in this tournament. So it'll be interesting, but yeah, I think you're definitely right in saying that, because just how up and down they've been, and the fact that they were so hungry for goals at the beginning of the season and kind of falling a little bit. They scored 4 goals against Lowell in their last game, but other than that, 1-1-2 in their last 3 games. In that main game, like you said, it was pretty abysmal, and you can say that, like you said, about a few of their games this year. Yeah,
on Joe Wool, I don't think you can say he's been as great consistently, but when he's on, he is on.
Oh, yeah.
He pretty much stole a win from BU at Agganis Arena for them, in which he made high 30s, low 40s saves, and then helped in a remarkable effort to get the first ever scoreless tie between the 2 teams in Connie Forum the next day afterwards. And Wool, on save percentage, is still a top 25 goaltender at .922. It's mere percentage points above Caden Primo of Northeastern, who, of course, will be one of the big guns for Northeastern. We'll get to them in a little bit. But, yeah, so Joe Wool is perfectly capable of committing highway robbery. And actually, of the 4 goaltenders who will be going into this as the starters for their respective teams, which would be Primo, Wool, Michael Lackey, and Jake Ottinger, Primo actually has the lowest save percentage of all 4 of those goaltenders at .920. Wool is next at .922, so not that big a difference. Michael Lackey is at .924, again, not that much of a difference. And Jake Ottinger at .925, not that much a difference. They're all top 25 goaltenders in the country on that statistic alone. And it is a tournament in which, especially when you get into these overtime games, which I mentioned to you before I came on and we started recording this. I was in Albany last night to cover the Mayor's Cup between RPI and Union, and man, would I have liked to have seen continuous sudden death overtime, which we'll get in the Beanpot, because it's just more opportunities for goalies to really shine in tense, tight situation hockey, I think. And we get that in the Beanpot, so that's one of the more exciting parts of the game, I think.
Yeah, it's true. It's like you said, you don't get it in every tournament, in every game with a trophy like that. It's just been, I guess, the importance of the Beanpot, and that's really one of the reasons that you see it in that form, is where the continuous overtime. So definitely adds to the excitement of the game, and like you said, it's made for some really exciting finishes. And I know one of the things that was talked about at the Beanpot luncheon is because of those times and the TV and everything. Try to keep those overtimes to a minimum, but I guess for us as observers just watching now, I don't think we certainly mind, that's for sure.
I mean, a lot of the people who work those games are thinking, can I go home, please? I mean, you remember last season, round one of the tournament, Northeastern beats BC 3-0, and then Harvard and BU take to double overtime.
Right.
Which has been kind of a theme between those schools. My first ever game where I attended a Beanpot, it's still one of my favorite sporting events, not just hockey, not just college hockey. It was the first round of the 2015 tournament when Steve Michalik made 63 saves and BU won in double overtime 4-3, because Michalik was amazing, but he couldn't withstand the barrage of the Rodriguez, Eichel, and O'Regan line forever, and Matty Grzelcyk, who was the MVP of that Beanpot tournament. And I actually overheard some people last year, I won't name names, but I overheard some people, like college hockey media people, saying, man, we should just have 5-minute overtimes and we should be done with this, and then we should have a shootout. Which, no, I'm not a shootout fan. I like overtime. I like consistent, because playoff hockey is the greatest sporting thing on planet Earth, in my opinion. And part of it is sudden death overtime is awesome. You don't get that kind of tension anywhere else, in my opinion. Am I overblowing that, do you think, or?
No, I mean, I understand both sides of it. Obviously, it's a tournament, and in the grand scheme, it's doesn't mean as much as, say, the Hockey East at the end of the season, where you're fighting to go to the NCAA tournament. But it's a tradition, and that's what's been done. And really, if you think about it, most of these games aren't going to 2 and 3 overtimes. It's usually settled. A lot of the time, it's settled in, seems like 5 minutes, 10 minutes. But those obviously double overtime games where the goaltenders are making 60 saves are kind of the rarity. But no, I definitely think that if you keep it up, it's certainly going to continue on that kind of trend. And yeah, if you kind of look back, just flip to the history, only most of the overtime games are ending in that first one. It's only been a couple, and they've both been, like you said, one last year and the one that you mentioned in 15 are the only ones kind of in the last 10 years, it looks like, that went after the first overtime. So it's fun, and I agree it should certainly make for the excitement, and I think we'll certainly could see that next Monday in the Beanpot.
I agree. But it's interesting you say on the importance. We'll get back into the teams for a moment by simply saying that I don't think you can overlook how important these games are from a pairwise perspective, because right. We've got the two highest-ranked teams in the tournament in the pairwise are Northeastern and Harvard. Harvard's at 15 right now, so they are right on the cusp of missing the tournament entirely. And Northeastern, they slipped a bunch after. It's funny that BC has had their two recent Hockey East victories against Providence, because Northeastern did not have a good weekend against Providence at all. A home-and-home sweep at the hands of the Friars, and they're going to be playing some of the most important hockey of the season when they go in. At 13th in the pairwise, that's right at the point when you start feeling uncomfortable and start tugging on your collar a little bit, thinking that you have to win out in order to secure yourself a spot, or at least make it to the conference title game to secure yourself a spot.
Yeah, it's definitely that, and it seems like we've been talking about pairwise a lot in the last couple of years as far as this. I know, I think it was BC maybe a couple of years ago when they missed the tournament, that or might have been even last year. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but I know one of these last couple of years where they lost the consolation game, it ended up being like point something percentage points. And if they'd had a loss or made a loss, a tie or a tie, a win or something like that, that they were going to the tournament. And a lot of times these Beanpot, especially those consolation games where BC's been in a couple times in the last few years, 3 out of the last 4, it looks like, especially for them where they've struggled in those non-conference games, you can look back to these a lot of the time and as the missed opportunity. So even if it's the consolation game that you're in, you definitely don't, you can't take it lightly. And oftentimes it can be such a huge deciding factor in that pairwise race. So it should be no different this year with, like you said, a couple teams fighting right at that bubble.
Yeah, Northeastern and Harvard right at that bubble. They're right on the line of making it on their overall body of work or not. BU is 22nd in the pairwise. If they want to get into the tournament, they're going to have to win out. And BC is 42nd. They have no choice but to win out and try to get themselves up. But still, for just the prestige and to try and turn around what's been a really hard luck season for the Eagles, a couple wins in the Beanpot could absolutely get them turned around, because I look at this BC roster and I just think there is no reason why this team should be struggling as mightily as they are. Of all the 11 Hockey East teams right now, they're tied with Merrimack for dead last in goals scored at 53, and they're tied at points with 143. That's 10 points behind UConn for the next spot up. But I look at this roster and I just think, why is this team struggling to score? There's talent on this team that can put the puck in the net, if for nothing then for Logan Hutsko alone. Am I crazy for thinking that?
No, but it seems like it's been a one-line, kind of a one-line show this year with Cotton has obviously been unbelievable, 15 goals so far. And he's really been one of those guys that Coach York's counted on really throughout his career, junior now, and Madela and Hutsko the same thing. But you've seen it with someone like the captain Chris Brown lately has really come on strong. But other than that, it's been a real struggle. And Oliver Wallstrom, I know we've talked at the beginning of the season, was really struggling. He's starting to pick it up a little bit now. So you're starting to see it a little bit. But like I said a little earlier, it's the last couple games they've only scored outside of that tie. It's 1-1 and 2 goals in the 3 games before they lost. I think it was a 2-0 and 3-1 lead in that tie against Lowell. So it's really been outside of that one line. It's been hard to find some consistency. It just seems like no matter what they were trying, especially before they put that line together, but even still in some of these recent games, that it's been hard to find some consistency and some kind of lines that have worked for BC. But that Cotton Model Hutsko line, I'm sure, especially in coming down the stretch here where they need every win they can get, they're definitely going to be a line that Coach York has relying on, and certainly I don't think that will be any different going in these last few weeks of the season, especially in the Beanpot, where, like you said, a trophy is so it's the Beanpot, but it's kind of a stepping stone to the rest of the season if you treat it the right way and obviously go for those wins, which are so important at this point in the season, especially for them.
Puck University will continue after a brief word.
Life is about making decisions. At BMW I, we decided it was time to reinvent the car from the ground up, making sure we were open for truly innovative ideas. We decided that the car we wanted must be electric, and it should be made of extremely light and super strong carbon fiber. And finally, we decided to make it more intelligent and added our promise of incomparable driving pleasure. We made all these decisions to offer you a choice. The all-electric BMW i3.
Shifting the conversation over to the team that they will be playing this will be the last true out-of-conference game that they play against Harvard, because all these games are technically counted as non-conference games, which is kind of a misnomer because, 3 of the teams are in Hockey East, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
So it doesn't count for Hockey East stuff. Of course, it's the Beanpot, so yeah, whatever. Harvard has, I find this bit surprising, Harvard has the leading scorer going into the tournament. He is a defenseman named Adam Fox, who we know is sick, but he's played 19 games and has 27 points. His point-per-game pace is a 1.42, which is third behind Taro Hirose of Michigan State, who probably should be getting some more Hobie Baker consideration, and Evan Barrett of Penn State. He's the highest scoring defenseman on a point-per-game basis, and if Harvard had... I'd argue that if Harvard had either just played more games or didn't have such a poor start to the season and have been playing the way they have the last month or so for their whole season, Fox would be in the Hobie Baker conversation at least a lot higher up than where he is, where at least a lot of us Eastern guys, I think a lot of people feel like Cale Makar is the obvious runaway choice. But Fox, at least in this tournament, is possibly the most talented player, the most offensively productive player going into the first two Mondays of February.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about that. Obviously, like you said, Cale Makar's been kind of dominating the Hockey East, kind of ECAC, the Eastern Hobie Baker race. But outside of that, it could be all defensemen with the way those points per game are going. And like you said, Hirose and Barrett are two guys who are ahead of him and certainly will, I'm sure, be there in the end as far as those finalists. But he is definitely has been scoring all season, and he's obviously the captain, the quarterback of that power play that's been so great this year, right from the first game of the season where they scored 6 goals and lost. So like you said, if they are a little more, I guess, consistency on that defensive end, the beginning of the season, because some of those games that they were losing, they were scoring goals, but kind of being outscored 1 or 2 goals in several of those games. Like you said, it could be kind of a different story, but they're playing. It's always important to be playing your best hockey at the right time of the year, and they're kind of doing it right now with the way they've been playing. Beat Quinnipiac a couple weeks ago, and beat Clarkson over the weekend in a weekend sweep at home that they again scored a lot of goals. Again, the next night they scored 7 against obviously a pretty bad St. Lawrence team, but they're scoring goals, and Adam Fox is certainly the defenseman label is certainly not keeping him off the score sheet, because he's been unbelievable this year. And another thing about Harvard is that they have such a talented freshman class that's kind of helping them out too, which you can't always expect the numbers that they're putting up, but they're putting up some pretty insane numbers from that freshman class. So they're playing some pretty good hockey at the right time, and it'll be interesting to see what happens in the Beanpot, because they can make some noise, especially against a team that, like we talked about with BC, has been struggling to score some goals. So could be exactly what you're looking for if you're Harvard.
Yeah, so for the last weekend, it was a 4-3 overtime victory over Clarkson, which is a very big win. Clarkson has been excellent all season. Yeah. I believe Jake Kiley was in net for that game. I'm trying to pull up the box score for that one. Yeah, so they managed to get 4 goals by Jake Kiley, who still made 37 saves. But That's no small thing. Kylie's a great goaltender. He'll be in the consideration for the Richter Award at the end of the season. And then in St. Lawrence, okay, I saw that team play in Las Vegas. That team is bad. I mean, not that. That team is bad. We were sitting next to each other at historic Matthews Arena, because we have to call it historic Matthews Arena, otherwise we get eaten on Twitter. You understand how that works. Your Twitter is inundated with Northeastern people who are like that. So, but we were looking at that score thinking, oh man, this game could get really ugly really fast. And it kind of did. But I feel like I should note about Harvard that the biggest difference for them performance-wise, aside from the fact that defensive core is ridiculous, that defensive that blue line roster, 4 draft picks on that Harvard team. Fox, third round, originally Calgary, but his rights were with the Hurricanes when he got traded as part of the Dougie Hamilton deal. John Marino in Edmonton, Jack Rathbone, a 4th rounder of the Vancouver Canucks, quietly a team to pay attention to, and Riley Walsh of the Devils from the 17 draft in the 3rd round. I've heard some people, maybe this is just biased people from the Harvard Crimson, but a couple of their guys have said if you put this group of defensemen with the 2017 Beanpot and ECAC and Frozen Four appearance team, that group of forwards, your Ryan Donatos, your Alexander Kerfoots, and all that group, that'd be a national championship team. And I think he's right. That this defensive core is one of the best. But Michael Lackey has grown into the role of being a starting goaltender, not just for a college team, but for Harvard, because he looks a lot better and a lot more comfortable now than he ever has through any point of the season.
Yeah, it's been great to see the performance that he's put up this year. Like we talked about, it's kind of it's really his first year being able to run with the ball and to take the starting job, because Merrick Madsen was so good for the first few years of his career. So really got to watch it and learn behind him, and it has to be easy to play behind a group that's scoring so many goals and with such talented defensemen, like you said, with all those draft picks. And obviously the .924 save percentage really speaks for itself, and it's been a good year there for him. And I know certainly over the last couple of weeks, those numbers have kind of gone down, and his save percentage has been able to rise up a little bit in the last few weeks. So Harvard's looking really good at the right time of the year here, and Lackey is certainly a big part of that, as any goaltender is, and he's played really well lately.
Yeah, that forward core for Harvard is also pretty interesting, I think, because Jack Bedini and Jack Drury, a pair of Jacks, are high caliber. They're also draft picks as well. Bedini of the Ducks in the 17th and the 3rd round, and Drury from this past year in the 2nd round to Carolina, in which you can kind of jokingly call it Brass Bonanza North, which just means returning the Hurricanes to New England, which as a native of Connecticut makes me very sad. Anyway, it's a team that's got a really nice balance up front with Michael Floodstrand, who's been there before, Nathan Krusko, who was the MVP of their 2017 Beanpot win. He's gotten a couple points, had 3 points over the weekend, including 2 assists in that Clarkson game. I've always liked watching him play. Baker Shore, who's a really interesting player, and Louis Zerder-Gossage, who is playing like a captain of a championship contender team. So there's plenty to pay attention to on this Harvard roster.
Yeah, so like we're talking about a couple of those guys, like you said, freshmen, and I don't think you even mentioned Casey Dornbach, who's not a draft pick at all, but he's been with Fox, kind of one of the leaders of that power play. So many of his points coming on the power play, but he's been a guy who I know when Jack Drury was away from the team at World Juniors, he kind of stepped into that top line role and was really able to kind of work with Zerder-Gossage really well, and just kind of play without missing a beat there. So definitely will be fun to see them at full strength here going forward, and looking forward to the Beanpot, where they're able to kind of come into this Hockey East. I think obviously the Hockey East teams play each other during the rest of the season, so BC and Harvard are obviously meeting for the first time this year. Actually, they did play BU early in the season. Harvard did, but really interesting to see when they come in against the Hockey East teams that they haven't played over the course of the season, and I think they match up pretty well with the Eagles as far as the way things are going lately.
Yeah, that power play. Let's just highlight that. The Harvard power play success rate is 35.9% success rate, which is that's kind of ridiculous. Their penalty kill is at a 74%, which The next closest, by the way, of any school overall is UMass Amherst at 31.2, so that's a 4% difference. You have to scroll down a little bit before you find the next Beanpot school on here. Did I skip over Northeastern? I'm taking a look at the listing of power play efficiency, and BU is at 29, at 29th ranked at 18.1% on the season. Northeastern, shockingly, 16.8% success rate on the power play. That's surprising. That's really surprising that Northeastern has struggled as much on the special teams.
Yeah, it's been a different year for Northeastern really this year, and obviously Adam Gaudet, Dylan Sakura, Nolan Stevens really made that unit go, and that's why they were one of the nation's best last year. But it's been a little bit different this year. That they haven't had to rely on that kind of group as much. So that's part of it. But they are kind of relying more on being more balanced, which is something that they struggled with in the last couple of years when those guys were around. Definitely, you don't want to be that low, but they really haven't had to. They've been winning games without that power play clicking as well as it had in the last couple of years. I'm sure Jim Madigan would like to see it go up, but they haven't had to rely on it as much, and they've definitely been able to win their fair share of games. I think if you look to their last weekend, that special teams maybe for the first time over the season really hurt them as far as winning and losing games, where they give a couple shorthanded goals in that first Providence game, and Providence takes advantage on the second night as well with their power play, so talent that they have. So it's been a different year for Northeastern. They haven't had to rely on it as much, but you like to see it go up, and especially in these tournament situations, the power play penalty kill, really important part of the game. Agreed.
It's just, it really has been an interesting, and I guess that actually works as a very perfect transition from the early game, the 5 o'clock game on the first Monday, the Harvard BC game, to the Northeastern BU game, which, by the way, isn't it so nice to see these teams that just love each other so much getting to renew acquaintances? It's just wonderful. They love each other so much that they want to punch each other in the face. It's awesome. I maintain that I can't verify this for any level of certainty, but I'm pretty sure that if you were to get Jim Madigan, to be honest, the school that he's had the biggest war with and the biggest rivalry with is BU. And this is the one that's the most steeped in recent competition and recent war, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, obviously the Beanpot's pretty special, no matter who, but definitely I think BC and BU are the teams that they have had the most recent kind of history with, like you said, especially with the Beanpot and the Hockey East recent years. But BC too, they played Hockey East series and Hockey East tournament games against each other too. So definitely those Hockey East schools, as far as it being part of the ones that I think you kind of think of as far as the history is concerned. So, but yeah, Northeastern BU, especially after the championship last year, usually works out that's the way that the matchup goes, and it'll be fun to see how this one shakes out, because two teams that are playing, like we talked about at the beginning, Northeastern been pretty consistent through the year, trying to kind of get a win under their belt after kind of their first rough offensive stretch of the year, as far as the length that it's gone, and BU outside of their loss with Arizona State, playing some pretty good hockey right now as well. So it'll be fun second game.
Yeah, let's stay on Northeastern for a little bit, because January was not a particularly great month for them. They went 3-4 overall. Their wins, they swept Maine, which, going on the road to the Alfond Arena up in Orono, is not an easy task to do, even though Maine hasn't been everything that they were hoping to be. That's not a small thing at all to go up into the Alfond Arena and get 2 wins up there. including a shutout on the Saturday game. Then they came home and they got massacred by UMass Amherst when they went to the Mullins Center. They came home and got a 2-1, very, very thrilling overtime victory in which Caden Primo absolutely stole the game from them.
Yeah.
And then they had a very bad weekend against Providence in which they had 1 goal over 2 games and lost both of them. On pure momentum, they're probably the team struggling the most who actually might need a win at the they might legitimately need a win in their Friday game before the Beanpot, and they have maybe the toughest challenge in that because they get to play Massachusetts Lowell, who's shooting up the rankings as of recently. And I always worry about the hot team that's on a stretch. I know BU has to play UMass Amherst, and they've been consistently great all season, but I kind of think that the Northeastern UMass Lowell matchup might be a bit harder just because hot teams and hot goaltenders are a different kind of challenge to face because you think you're going to get something. You might legitimately get something crazy special. It's just my thought on that whole thing.
Yeah, I think certainly BU and Northeastern kind of have the challenges there, and no team really. You can't you can't look ahead when you're playing these league games because, like we were kind of talking about with the pairwise, you don't want to look back at the end of the season and see a 2-point gap or a 1-point gap or whatever it may be in the league standings either, because those can cost you the home ice, the bye, the whatever it is, spots in the playoffs. So it's definitely, and especially I agree because Northeastern beat Lowell twice at the beginning of the season, once on the road and in overtime at Matthews that they had to use one of their, it seemed like at the beginning of the season, pretty routine 2-goal third period comebacks for Northeastern. So it's really hard to beat a team 3 times in a year. And like you said, with the way UMass Lowell has been playing, unbeaten run that they've been on, should be a really fun game on Friday night at Matthews as well. And like you said, trying to get momentum for that Beanpot, which can be so important going into that first Monday.
Definitely agree with that. This Northeastern team has been really a pretty interesting bunch to try and get a read on, but there's plenty of high-skilled guys who either came in this season or are left over from last season. Namely, Tyler Madden's a beast, and he's not a big guy. He's a point-a-game player at 20 points in 20 games and 8 goals, 12 assists, and he's gotten the big goals. I mean, Jeremy Davies is the best skater on this team. I'd argue that Primo is probably might be the best total package player, but it's either him or Davies, I think, as where the best pieces of this whole operation lie. Yeah,
it's been certainly fun to watch Madden as well. He kind of, like you said, not a big guy, and kind of fits that Gaudreau kind of mold that so many of the NHL best NHL players are these days. Really, another actually Vancouver draft pick, so I'm sure at some point would like to see himself with Adam Gaudette up there as well. But yeah, it's been a fun year there. Another team where defenseman has to be so reliable with Jeremy Davies. But like we were talking about a little bit earlier, the way that they've gone this year without Gaudette and Dylan Sakura and Stevens, they've had to rely on a little more balance, and it's been tough to come by lately as far as the points and the goals are concerned, but they're really using this. They're the defending champion for the first time in a really long time. So certainly coming into this tournament in a favorable position as far as that's concerned. But they're a team that's been pretty consistent all year, and they haven't when they've lost games, they haven't made it bad consecutive weekends really over the course of the whole season. They've been able to bounce back, and looking at this Lowell game first, certainly look to do that at home against a team they've already beaten twice, and kind of take care of business going into the Beanpot. So they're a team that can certainly do it, and they're a team, like we were talking about earlier as well, that's in NCAA contention, and they need to keep playing with as much consistency as they were early in the season, it should be a team that you are looking at the end to be near the top of Hockey East and in that national picture, because they have been so consistent this year, and that's something they were struggling with in years past, and they've really been able to kind of benefit from it and put themselves in a position where they can compete for Hockey East and later on if they get there.
Let's shift over and spend some time talking about the Boston University Terriers, who have seemed to have made a recent habit of starting off terribly and looking like they don't belong in the sport, only to remind people, oh yeah, they're actually pretty good and stuff, and they've got like real wicked talent and all of the players who were drafted last season, because that's basically what they did last season, where they started out up and down rock bottom, and they I think they had, in the stretch of just a couple games, had a 9-goal outburst against UMass Lowell to end the first semester, and then they started off the second semester with a 3-0 dud against Maine, which was a lot worse than 3-0 makes it out to be. But it's been, in my opinion, the most puzzling team to try and figure out, because they either look really, really good, like getting narrow wins at Providence, dominating Merrimack, and edging out Arizona State, or they're just making mistakes. Like that Quinnipiac game on the 19th when they lost 4-3 and gave up 2 goals in, I think 2 goals in the third, and 2 of them went to Brandon Fortunato, including the game with like 2 or 3 seconds left to play in regulation. That's just heartbreaking. That's the kind of season, and then they get shut out against Arizona State, which, to be fair, there's not exactly a lot of shame in getting shut out by Joey Dackard, and there's not a lot of shame in Vinny Perpera, who made his first collegiate start and made 36 saves on 39 shots faced. That's actually very, very good. But I think you do have to be concerned about it, particularly with the more physical play of the Beanpot. There were a pair of misconduct penalties from that ASU game that they'll have to just clean up the potentially messy play, I think.
Yeah, you really want to stay out of the box, especially in these games against these teams with so much talent. But the thing about BU is if BU's around 500 at the beginning of the season, they're a team that you don't really you don't want to worry too much about them if that's the position they're in. There are a couple games, especially in that October stretch where they hadn't won, actually didn't win a game in October, but there were a couple games and it has been the case throughout the entire season that they were losing some close games, and especially at the beginning of the season with BU, you're always talking about a team that is seeing players lost from the year before and seeing players graduate, and so I don't really worry about BU at the beginning of the season because it always seems like they're able to figure themselves out. The worrying trend is more the way Northeastern started the last couple of years, where they were just for almost until Christmas they were 1 win, 2 win, a couple win team over the course of first semesters. The last few years before this year were they able to play really well throughout the first half of the season, but BU always seems to figure it out, and they that's the thing with young players. It takes time to kind of find the combinations and get kind of, in some cases, some players who are used to playing star roles into some different roles, and it really seems like in the last couple weeks, outside of those couple losses that they had, some pretty good games that they were able to play against Merrimack, like you said, and the end of the first half beating Lowell, one of their games. It is interesting to think that they didn't win a game against BC with the way that BC season has gone, but that happens, those things in rivalry games. So BU is a team that's playing really well right now, and they do have a lot of talent, and certainly throughout the second half of the season so far, you really kind of seen things go together under Albie O'Connell, obviously in his first year as the head coach. So it'll be interesting, and they are a team that looks to kind of keep that momentum going. Hard task against UMass first, but but they're always a team that gets up for the Beanpot, and they've lost the Beanpot championship game 3 years in a row, which, especially for BU, is something that just really doesn't happen.
Yeah, Jake Ottinger, maybe the most decorated of the goaltenders, entering a first-round draft choice of the Dallas Stars a while ago. He's lost 2 consecutive Beanpot championship games in which, truthfully, Harvard and Northeastern were both better teams than BU. And I maintain still that had Northeastern gotten through Michigan last year in round 1, Northeastern would have beaten BU and moved on to the Frozen Four, because that matchup did not work out well for BU. That top line of Sakura, Stevens, and Gaudet cooked BU consistently. So the way I look at it, in each of the last 3 seasons, BU has ended up losing the Beanpot championship game to an eventual Frozen Four team. With the one caveat of Northeastern didn't actually make it there, but I still look at them as they should have been there. Like, I still think they were a better team than Michigan, but they just didn't play like it. So Ottinger has played pretty well in each of the last couple of Beanpots. He's obviously proven his salt when he's gotten to the NCAA tournament and the Hockey East tournament, and I have absolutely no doubt at all that he will put on a pretty good showing against first off against UMass, the top team in Hockey East right now, one of the top teams in the nation, on Friday night game, which I'll be seeing, and then on Monday against Northeastern, the puck drops at 8. Let's wind this up with our predictions and for what we think will end up happening. So I will let my good friend and my guest go first. Josh Kummins, for the 5 p.m. puck drop between Boston College and Harvard, who are you taking?
I'm taking Harvard. I think that it's a more complete team. BC has really struggled and struggling to score goals. It'll be interesting to see what BC can do against a UConn team that also lost last night against Atlantic hockey team Sacred Heart. But it seems like Harvard's been definitely the more complete team all year, and it seems like BC has struggled to score goals. So I'm going to take Harvard.
I will agree with that. I'm also going to take Harvard, and I think this game has the potential of being a blowout. I hope it isn't, because I don't like blowouts in tournament games. I think that's horribly boring, but I think that this is one game where it has the potential to get out of hand. In part, I just think it's been that kind of season for BC where stuff just hasn't worked out well. And going into these kinds of games, it has that possibility of it just not going well for the Eagles. Okay, so the late game, the Boston University versus Northeastern game. Joshua Kummins, who are you choosing for that game?
Yeah, I think this it's a much tougher decision, like we were kind of hinting at. It's definitely two teams that, like you said, don't like each other, and two teams that played a couple entertaining games early in the season too. And I think, like we're talking about, it's hard to get results against teams 3 times in a row. So I think this one could be Northeastern's, because it's a team that's really hungry. They're coming off of defending that championship, and I think that they, like you said, have the talent. And even though Primo is maybe statistically, like we're mentioning, the worst goalie in the tournament, he's someone who has been known to play well in these big games and played really well last year. And for a lot of the time this year, when they've needed a big goaltending performance, especially like we're talking about in that game against UMass, he was really there in the end to kind of bail the team out. But I think that it's again a team that's been relying on depth, and I know one of the things that talking about at I can't remember if it was the Beanpot luncheon or the story I've been working on for the Hockey Journal. It'll come out pretty soon about the team, that it always seems like someone kind of unheralded steps up in some of these big games. So I think Northeastern kind of has the potential for kind of that depth to show through and be a team that can get someone new on the score sheet and and in these big games. So I think after not beating BU in the Hockey East regular season series, Northeastern's probably certainly going to be a tight one, but I think that they have a good shot at this one.
You know, it'd be pretty interesting because it would be the first time, if your prediction holds up, it'd be the first time that we would ever have the matchup between Northeastern and Harvard in the Beanpot final. And also worth noting, we have had each Beanpot team win it in each different years. BU in 15, BC in 16, Harvard in 17, and Northeastern in 18. So we have had a remarkable amount of parity throughout this tournament, especially in recent years. So there's a part of me that absolutely would love to see the Northeastern-Harvard matchup, just for statistical possibility, for that to be the first matchup between those teams. I think that'd be awesome. Yeah. I think it'd be a lot of fun to get to watch and enjoy that matchup. I think those teams would match up really nicely, and they're not natural rivals historically, so I don't know how that matchup would play, and we talk about it next week if I decide to bring you back on. No, I'll probably end up bringing you back on for all this stuff. Anywho, so as for the BU Northeastern matchup, it's honestly a toss-up for me because I could absolutely see BU pulling some voodoo magic and getting a win after. BU it has the most success in this tournament long-term, and it's not close. They've been a finalist 53 times. They've won the darn thing 30 times. So I think it's absolutely possible for them to pull some voodoo magic out of nowhere and ride Jake Ottinger to a win and ride that talent, which is finally now clicking. I do think Northeastern is a better team, though, overall for the entire course of the season. I just have my hang-ups as to whether or not they can get their momentum going in the right direction at this point in time. So, on the flip of a coin, I'm going to pick Northeastern just because I think that they'll be motivated enough because they want to defend that championship, and they want to beat BU in a way that I don't think any other school in this tournament wants to beat any other team. Maybe if we get a BU-BC consolation game, then BU would want to beat BC that badly and vice versa, which would actually make for the best consolation game in tournament history. But I'm going to pick Northeastern, but this is very much I am flipping a coin and taking a guess on who I'm picking in that game.
Yeah, it is really interesting with that one. It's certainly going to be a fun one. And last year's championship game, obviously a lot of fun as well. But Northeastern was really able to kind of pull it out in the end there. And I think actually the final score was a little bit further away than I think the game maybe felt before the third period, I think. Trying to kind of remember that one offhand, but definitely by the end it was Northeastern's game, and they were able to pull it out. And I think this year that 5-2 score, I don't really see that coming at all. So I think it's going to be a really fun game, the second game of Monday night.
Joshua Kummins of the New England Hockey Journal. You said you're working on a story for the Journal on the team or on the tournament at large. You can find all of his stuff at the New England Hockey Journal. I think you can find his socials at Joshua Kummins on Twitter, and I believe on Instagram as well, just his name, Joshua, J-O, spelled like that dude from the Bible. Kummins spelled Kummins. I believe I have that all correct. Do I?
That's right.
Awesome. You can follow this podcast on. You can follow my socials first on CC Lynch Wall on Twitter. You can follow me on Instagram at CCLynch16. I'm going to be writing up a tournament preview for the Beanpot that should be up in the next couple of days, and I'm going to write up a January notes piece for college hockey at large. There will also be an edition of this podcast being released simultaneously to this one, discussing the sport at large. We just reserved the Beanpot Talk for this one in particular. You can follow Puck University on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, Blog Talk Radio. Please leave a review wherever you find this. Thank you so much for tuning in and enjoying this edition of Puck University. Thank you for your enjoyment of college hockey. And in the words of the great Tim Williams, keep your head up and your hits clean.